So how do you go about it and what is the ethics of it? So coming on to, so what I'll be dealing today about is the research ethics. What are the ethical issues that are, these are the ethical issues that are raised when people are involved as participants in research. So what we are basically trying to address is what is the ethics in research. And we are basically concerned for our investigators, but we are also concerned with the participants who are there in the research. So basically the objectives are to protect the rights and safety of the research participants. And we need to ensure that the research is conducted, that it is for the interest of everyone, not only the investigator, but also for the individual, for the group, and for the society as a whole. And also we need to look at different issues and activities which are going on in that research project. So as Dr. Ankur has already talked about, so we need to basically safeguard the four basic principles of ethics. That is a respect for persons, autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. And when we are able to do this, we are in the ethical purview. The other thing which is very important when you have a project is to look and to analyze the risk and benefit ratio. So what, before we know what is the risk and what is the benefit, we need to know what is minimal risk. So every study is defined by four principles, whether it is minimal risk, is it less than minimal risk, or low risk and high risk. So the main basic thing is what is minimal risk. So minimal risk has been defined is not greater in or themselves than those ordinary encountered in the daily life. So that is what the US FDA says. So every person who is walking even on the road may have a traffic accident. So there is a risk in everything you do all the time. So any test you undergo, there may be a risk. So anything which is less than this minimal risk is, that is how you qualify a study. So a less than minimal risk will be in a study. When example, you have a study in which you are just using questionnaire, you're using the data of the patients, you're taking out data. So there is less than minimal risk. You may argue that there is no risk at all. Why do we even say that there is less than minimal risk? But there is a risk in the form that you may at times have these studies in which you are using data, but you may at times reveal these data and could put them on the public domain. So there is some risk for the participants. So that is why it is generally qualified as less than minimal risk. Similarly, when you have low risk, you are going above the minimal risk and then classifying that risk into a low risk or a high risk. High risk study is something in which you're trying to do an intervention, you're trying to give a drug, you're trying to do for example, you just for the biopsy, for just for the study, you're doing a biopsy, you're doing a CSF examination, that will come under high risk. But for example, you're already doing a biopsy in a patient and you say that for that study, you will require a small bit of tissue more, and then that will qualify for a low risk. So that is how we classify the risk in our studies. So what does the bioethics cell do? So the bioethics cell talks about the ethical, scientific, and legal issues of the different research proposals that come under the ethics committee for its consideration. Apart from that, we are also involved in doing a lot of things about organizing and effective tracking of all the projects, making our SOPs, organizing meetings, and other so forth. But basically, the main issue is we are trying to review the projects which come to us, and for looking at the organization of the projects in SGPGI, all projects which are done in PGI, even if they are retrospective studies, they are prospective studies, DM, MD, any type of study, has to come to the bioethics cell, and it has to be reviewed by the bioethics cell. You need to get an approval letter from the bioethics cell, and then you can move forward and do the study, even for retrospective studies. So sometimes we face a problem that the PIs do the study, they take out the retrospective data, but at the time of publication, the journals ask them for an approval letter from the ethics. So you need to realize that every study that you do needs a bioethics approval, ethical review before it is done. The second thing is for the research, you may be wondering what does the research cell do. So the research cell takes up studies in which there is some funding involved. For example, the intramural research and the extramural research, but those studies also need to first come to the bioethics cell for ethical review. So the projects for review can be regular or the full board reviews, the expedite reviews, or exemption from reviews. So we have such certain studies which come under the purview of exemption from review, some under the expedite and some under the regular review. So the expedite reviews are those projects in which, like for example, you have the retrospective review data. You are just analyzing a data. So in those cases, we just do an expedite review committee, which is a small committee, and we then expedite review these projects. Whereas in regular full board review, we generally take up those studies in which there is some type of an intervention involved. So that is a low risk or a high risk study. Exemption from review are studies in which you are just doing some analysis of the data which is already there on the public domain. So example for systematic reviews or the meta-analysis. So they don't even come under the purview of the ethics committee, but then also before doing those type of studies, you need to get a exemption from review in such studies. So how when a project comes for submission to the ethics committee, people who already have ethics committee approval of their projects will realize that every project has a number, and the coding of these projects is according to the year in which it has come. We give a serial number to it. We give an identification of the type of project we are talking about and the committee in which it had gone. So for example, in the last week, we had the 117th ethics committee. So the project will be written as 117. So that is how you can recognize the ID of your project. So now coming on to the submission in the ethics committees. So initially we used to have a offline mode of submission of the projects. In that you had to fill up a form and then submit it to the ethics committee. But now for the past year, we have made an online submission site, and now you have to submit your forms on the website. Having said that, we need to realize that the registration is only done for the faculty of this institute. So even if you are a student who wants to do a project, because there will always be a PI, that is the principal investigator, will always be a faculty. So ideally that faculty is required to enter the project on on the website in his or her name. And that is how it goes forward. So every faculty is registered in this website. So as soon as you go to the sign in page, you have this sign up thing, that is you have a user email and a password. As I said earlier, it is only for the faculty who can register, and that is how we validate their registration. So next, when you come to this page, this is the opening page in which we have the all important documents which are available on the page. That is a dashboard page where you have the general instructions, the online portal instructions, what is the glossary, what is the checklist, what are the different SOPs that you need to do. So everything is there on the dashboard, which can be looked into. Then you come into the My Project tab. When you come to the My Projects tab, you can see the listing of all the projects which are under that PI. And a PI can add new project into it. So if I want to add a new project, then this is the screen that will appear. I am showing you this screen because at times you will have to enter the project details of your project. The faculty may ask you to do it because it is your project. So you should know and understand that what are the things which need to be submitted. Even if the PI does it, the student has to make all things available to be uploaded on the site. So that is why you need to understand that there is an identification of a project. You have the project details which have to be uploaded. If you are collecting some specimen for the study, you need to tell that. Whether it is an interventional study, you will have a different tab for it. You then need to generate and upload letters, and then you have to final submit. After you final submit, their PDF is generated, and then you need to submit a checklist, and then you can have a printout of it and submit it to the ethics cell. So when you come to the identification of the project, you have the project title. You need to add the co-PIs. So only those co-PIs will be added. That is, those are the faculty of the institute and who are registered on this system. Then you have if you have a collaborator, you can also enter the name of the collaborator and upload the CV, you also have this tab where you can download the CV format, fill it up, and then upload it. Similarly, for the student, every student who is enrolled in a project will have to have a CV, and the name of the student should go. So you can add a name of the student and download the CV format. The student can fill it, and then the PI can upload it. You also need to tell whether it is funded or not. By default, it is always said it is no, it is not funded. But if it is funded, you say yes, and then you fill up the funding details. Similarly, for study duration, you need to add in years or months. By default, it is in years. But if you think it is a shorter project in months, you can also say 6 months or lesser than that or more than that, whatever it is. So this is about the project identification. Then the next is about the project details. In the project detail, you have to tell us what is the study design, what is it is interventional, observational, experimental, or retrospective, whether it is a single center or a multi-center study. If it is a multi-center study, then it will open a window and ask you to upload the name of the centers. Then you need to add up the details of the participants. That is what are the number of controls, what is the source of the controls, and if it is multi-center, this tab will automatically be functional and it will ask you what is the total number of participants. Similarly, the controls and the participants. So for example, in controls, you want to take some healthy volunteers. For example, you want to have their questionnaire, you want to have their sample of blood or urine or something. So you can enter the number of controls that you want to put up in this and your participants, and basically is your study group in which you want to basically analyze your results. So these come into the participants. You have to name the gender. What are the inclusion exclusion criteria? This is very important, because at times when you do not enter this, you will the ethics cell will ask you clearly defined exclusion and inclusion criteria for both the controls and the participants. So then the other thing which is important is to understand is a vulnerable participant status. So the vulnerable participants are those who are vulnerable to give consent. For example, a patient who is very ill and the doctor asks him or the patient whether you want to be a part of this study. Because the patient is very ill and he thinks he is obliged with the doctor, he may or she may say yes. So these are the group of vulnerable participants, and you need to declare to the ethics cell that these are the vulnerable groups which are there. For example, children, they are not mentally fit, or they're not so intelligent enough to say that yes, we want to participate or we don't want to participate. They may not understand that what is going on. So that is why we ask for the vulnerability of the participants in the study, and accordingly you need to tell us. So, and we also need to know whether there are any special group subjects, for example, captives, employees, students, etc. Then as you move along, you will be asked whether you are doing any advertising for recruitment of subjects. You have to attach any posters if you're saying yes. If there is a specimen collection, it will tell you that you have to go to that tab and enter the specimen collection. So for example, if I say no specimen collection, the tab which I showed in the first page for specimen collection, it becomes non-functional. Similarly, for intervention studies, then you need to say what are the risks and benefit. As I told you before, you have to identify whether there is less than minimal risk, minimal, or whatever. So by default, it is always there on less than minimal risk. And of course, you are provided a glossary or instructions to analyze what is minimal risk and what is less and then more than minimal risk. And you also need to see whether there is any benefit out of the study. And if there is benefit, is it to the subject or is it to the society? And you also need to see what is the risk and benefit ratio. So whether the risk is commensurate to the benefit. So when you say yes, you are trying to say the benefits are more and the risk is less. And then you need to identify areas in which there is any risk or benefit harm to the patient which may be there. So you have to analyze what is your opinion regarding risk and benefits related to the study. Of course, then there comes issues of privacy and confidentiality. And then you come to something which is an informed consent document. So as Dr. Ankur has already talked about something, he's given you a brief idea of consent document. So basically every informed consent document is formed of two parts. One is a PID, that is a participant information document, in which you tell the participant what is going to occur in the study. For example, you will tell the participant that this is a study about what are the samples that will be collected, Do you have a follow-up? Will you like the patient to come back and give a follow-up sample? And then what is the duration of the study that you are going to do, and whether it has been ethically approved or not. Sometimes there are studies, example, you have studies in which you're just doing a retrospective data analysis, you're not contacting the patients for follow-up or anything, then you can request the ethics committee for waiver of consent form. For this online program that we have developed, as soon as you say waiver of consent form, it will give you a tab in which you can generate a waiver of consent form, which is for this study, because the title of the study and everything will come automatically on the form. The other thing which is asked is what is the archival period. Generally, we archive all our documents for 3 years for all studies, academic studies, and for 5 years for the clinical trials. So if you want more time, generally this is true for clinical trials, you can ask the ethics committee, and accordingly the ethics committee can guide you. So then you need to upload a short summary of the study, in which you have to tell what are your aims and objectives, what is the background, and what do you want to do in just a few small paragraphs. And this is how you upload it. So as I said earlier, if you have specimen collection, you need to talk about the specimen collection. If I would have said no on that form, then it will have said, it will not have opened up. So this is how you need to tell what is the type of specimen that you need to collect, whether you are going to properly dispose it, will it be sent abroad, what if it is to be sent abroad, why it has to be sent abroad, and what are the clearances that have been obtained. And this is a tab for interventional studies. So if I say intervention studies, then I need to tell the ethics committee what is the type of intervention that we are going to do. For example, now you'll have COVID vaccines. If we are going to do a trial on vaccines, then we need to tell what is it. Then is it approved? What is the drug? Is it an investigational new drug, or it is already there in the market? Will there be any data monitoring? So how will you do that data monitoring? What will you see for the adverse events? What will be the interim analysis? For example, a study is approved, but after some time, after a month, you realize that most of the patients who are being given this drug are not responding. So you should have some interim analysis in place so that you can say that this is what is happening. And then of course you need to tell us whether you are going to pay to the patient something or not. And of course, if it has been registered with the CTI. Now I come to the last tab, that is what is the invest. So these are the things which you need to upload for the project submission. So this is the investigator signature, that is a PI will sign this form, but they can generate it from this online platform. So as soon as they say generate letter, a letter will be generated with the name of all the co-PIs, with the name of the title of the study, and then there will be a format in after which they have to sign and declare. Similarly, what is the conflict of interest declaration by the PI? You have to upload a committee approval for MD projects. You have the Dean's committee approval, which needs to be uploaded. And for DM and MCH projects, you have the DRC, that is a departmental research committee approval that has to be uploaded. And then you have finally the consent of the head of the PI's department, which has to be uploaded in all projects. This is how this comes to us. So when we have the list, we have the list of all the projects which have been uploaded. This is just to show you the list of things that need to be prepared, because initially before this online platform, we had everything which is offline. So we had these list of all the forms that were available. So this is a list of all things which should be ready with you when you are trying to upload a project. So of course the project, what are the different parts of the project application form, the consent of the head. Of course, you can generate it from our online platform. Then the DRC should be there. So you have to have a DRC. Then you have to have the undertakings, the conflict of interest, the CVs of the student or the collaborators. So you have the guidelines also, which are there for the PIDs. I'll talk about PIDs a bit later. And of course, the child assent form and all the information documents. And then finally, the checklist of documents. So coming back to informed consents, Dr. Ranko talked about it in brief. So basically, we need to know that this is informed consent. That is, the participant is informed and then he is giving consent for it. So the subject must be competent. As I told you earlier, there are a group of subjects who may be vulnerable and they may not be competent enough. For example, psychiatric patients may not be competent enough to give an informed consent. Then you must give a full disclosure. What are you going to do about the study? What risks they will have to face? What they will have to do as part of the study? What is their role? And what options they have? They do not want to take part in the study, then will it affect their treatment or management? The subjects must understand what the researcher tells them, and the decision to participate should be voluntary. This is just a guideline which is also available online. It is also available in the website of SGPGI, where we have given you the elements of the PID which should be there. So you can go through it. So basically, these are the same that I've already talked about. So one thing which I like to tell you is something look at is an assent versus a consent. So as I told earlier, the children may be vulnerable and they may not be good enough or intelligent enough to give the consent to participate, but they can give an assent. So basically, children who are the age of 7 and 18 years of age can give an agreement that they are participating in research. You can make them understand that this is what is being done with you. For example, you want a child to participate in a study in which you are doing an ECG. So the child should at least be told that you are going to do an ECG. So you will of course have to take a consent of the legally accepted representative or the parent or the guardian of the child. But the child should also be told that this is what is going to happen with you. So that is, the child is old enough to understand the implications of any proposed research, but is maybe not legally eligible to give his consent. So that is why then you need to form a child form, that is a child assent form. So in each study we ask you whether children are enrolled or not. If the children are enrolled, then you have to make a consent assent form. This is what is the guideline that I have told you, that there is a guideline for the consent of the participant information document, and they are a little different for interventional studies and for academic studies. For interventional studies, they are, of course you need to talk about it in larger detail. You have to think about each point in detail. But for academic studies, these points may not be relevant. Many of the points may not be relevant. So what we have been seeing that the students or the researchers, they try to answer all of these questions in an academic study, which is not required. So for example, what is a drug or procedure that is being tested? At times you are not even trying a drug. So why do you want to include that question? You can altogether exclude this question and delete it from your PID. So you don't need to say no and no drug or procedure is being tested. So instead of saying that, you just delete this point. So this is just a guideline to tell you that these are the points which need to be considered. If some of these points are not relevant to your study, you can just very well remove them. So these are the different questions that are there. So we have tried to cover almost all aspects of a PID which may be involved in any type of a study. So this is a guideline that we have made only for sample collection and no intervention. So you see that number of questions that you have is only 11. So this is how you can, in these also, there may be some questions which may not be required in an academic study, and so you can delete them. So this is just to show you that in an academic study, I'm telling you about an academic study that because most of our students who are participating in this foundation course are just doing academic studies. They are not major intervention studies that they are doing. So the clinical trials are generally done by the PIs. The students are just doing some academic studies in which they are doing minimal intervention. So you can have a PID which is just very comprehensive, in which you tell about the study, what is being done, what what is the duration of this study, why are you enrolled in the study, what will we do with you. We will have to take this amount of sample, then what will we do later, whether we will collect data later in when you come for the visits, or then what will happen to you if you don't want to take the study, participate, what will happen, whether it will affect your management. And you can also ask the patient and ask for his consent if you want to take up and keep those leftover samples for future studies. So that also you then need to include in the PID. And of course, you thank the patient, tell him that it has been ethically approved. And of course, at the down page, you also give contact details. One of the PI who's conducting, you can also give of the student, both of the student and the PI. PI is very essential. and second of the bioethics cell, so that the patient has has a way to report to the bioethics cell if he finds something wrong has been done. So ideally, you should give a copy of this PID to the participant so that he can keep it with him or her, so that he can look at it later and see that what he has done. This is just to show a Hindi PID. So as ethics cell member secretary, I know that the most of the problems that we face are with the Hindi PID, because I know we have students and from all over India, and at times people are not so well versed in writing Hindi for these PIDs, and that is really a good major problem with us. Of course, we have kept in our ethics cell uh, some examples of the English and the Hindi PID, which you can look at and make your PIDs accordingly. But because we have been facing a lot of problems with Hindi PID, I'll just tell you how a Hindi PID can be easily made. So the most easy way of making it is to make it through Hindi transliteration. So Hindi transliteration is basically based on phonetics. So this is true for a person who knows Hindi. The person who does not know Hindi will have a difficulty in making through transliteration. So for example, when you say आपको हम so you want to enroll a patient in a study, so हम आपको इस study में enroll करना चाहते हैं. So when you go back to you go to a website, this is something like you say Google transliteration, it will give you the Google input tools. When you open the Google input tools, you can write everything in English. So you, for example, it is easier for you to write in English, so you write किया. So because writing in Hindi is relatively difficult, so you say हमने किया है. So यह शोध हेपेटाइटिस के मरीजों में किया है. So when you write may, so you just write ME, so it will automatically change it into a Hindi font. So that marizon, so you write MARIZ. As soon as you start typing, it will start giving you options of what you can, and you can select from the list, and you can keep on typing in Hindi. So that is, and then you copy and paste it and in your document, and your Hindi PID is ready. But before doing that, you also need to first make your English PID properly, and then you can keep on writing in English, and it will keep on changing it into Hindi. So one thing which is very important when you write a PID is what you are writing. Whether you think an illiterate person, you will be able to explain to him or to him, so that this is what is being done in the study. So that is how you need to frame your PID, so that it is understood by anybody who comes to your hospital. The other way of writing is to do it through changing, that is translation. So if you do not know much Hindi, you can ask for what is a Hindi of hospital. So it will tell you aspatal, and then you can copy and keep on pasting it on your PID form. So this is how we can make a Hindi PID easily. Two methods. One is translation and transliteration. Transliteration for those who know Hindi, who can speak Hindi, but difficult to write Hindi on the documents. And the other is translation for those people who do not know Hindi. They know English, so they can keep on translating it into Hindi and then writing into the documents. Of course, if someone is good in Hindi and wants to write, typically type in Hindi, of course, you have an option, that is you have the fonts which are available, which you can download and then type from your keyboards. So I talked about a waiver of consent. As I said earlier, a waiver of consent can be taken for those studies in which you do not have any risk. So there is no more than minimal risk. And those are basically study like questionnaire-based studies, data analysis studies. In that, you just ask for waiver of consent. And in these studies, you're not involving the patients in any ways. You can take these waiver of consents for anonymized biological samples. For example, in pathology, we have blocks and archives of a large number of patients. In those, we can take them out and do our studies and ask for a waiver of consent, because we are in no way in contact with the patients, and we cannot even contact them and find out where they are. So these are the type of waiver of consent studies. Otherwise, you have to ask for PIDs. So for example, for diseased individuals, leftover samples, DNA, RNA, which are there, which have been left over. So this is basically the principle behind waiver of consent, is that it will not adversely affect the right and welfare of the participants. And what you need to do is in these waiver of consent is to protect the identity of the research participant and maintain that there is confidentiality of the data that you will use and publish in your study. So this is just to make you aware that as an ethics committee, we have our SOPs which are revised time to time, and this is the newest one which we have. It was published in 2018, and we are complying with this, and it is available on the SGPGI website. So if you have any doubt about any issue, you can go and look at the SOPs. This is something, these are the ICMR guidelines, which were published in 2017, and these are very important guidelines which have to be complied for all projects that are done. And if you have any issue which you are not very well aware of in your study, you can go to these guidelines, which are available freely online. These are the new drug and clinical trial rules in 2019 which have come up. And of course, we have to comply with all of these. And this is what is the framework on which we act when we have an intervention study. And so any student or any researcher who wants to do an intervention study should be aware of the new drug and clinical trial rules. So I end up here, and I will be happy to ask any questions. If you have, please ask any questions. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there is a difference between human being and being human, and that is what we are trying to tell in our ethics.